My wife served me divorce papers at my own retirement party while my children cheered, "Best day ever." That's the moment I learned what betrayal really looks like. The room had been full of laughter just seconds earlier. Plates clinked. Someone near the back was telling a story about the time we restored power during the ice storm of 2011. People were smiling at me like I was the hero of the night. 35 years. That's how long I'd spent climbing electrical poles for the city. 35 winters, 35 summers, storm calls at 2 in the morning, emergency shifts on Christmas Eve. And tonight was supposed to be the night they thanked me for it. Instead, my wife Catherine slid a manila envelope across the table like she was passing salt at dinner. "Jim," she said calmly, loud enough for the room to hear, "I think it's time we both moved on." The words didn't hit me right away. Maybe because the entire room had gone silent, or maybe because I could hear Tyler laughing behind me. My son. 26 years old, future doctor, the kid whose medical school applications I paid for without blinking. He leaned back in his chair and clapped once, slow, mocking. "About time," he said. "Honestly, best day ever." A few people gasped. Someone whispered, "Jesus." Melissa didn't even try to hide her smile. My daughter crossed her arms and shook her head like this had been overdue for years. "Dad, don't make a scene. Just sign it." Sign it? Like they'd already rehearsed this moment. Like my retirement party had secretly been something else entirely. I looked down at the envelope in front of me. Divorce papers. 14 pages thick. Catherine folded her hands neatly in front of her and spoke again, her voice soft but confident. "You deserve freedom, Jim. We both do." Freedom? That word hung in the air while 120 people stared at our table. My coworkers, my supervisor, the men who had trusted me with their lives on power lines during hurricanes. They looked confused because they knew something my family didn't. They knew I wasn't the kind of man who panicked under pressure. So instead of yelling, instead of arguing, I smiled and slowly signed the papers. The scratching sound of my pen on the document echoed through the silent hall. Catherine blinked, surprised. Tyler frowned. Melissa leaned forward. "Wait," she said quietly. "That's it?" I closed the folder, placed it back on the table, and reached down beside my chair for the worn leather briefcase I'd brought with me, the same one I'd carried to work for years. I placed it gently on the table. Then I looked at my family. "You're right," I said calmly. "Tonight is the perfect night for honesty." I clicked the locks open because the one thing Catherine thought she knew for certain was that she was divorcing a man who had nothing. And in about 10 seconds, everyone in that room was about to learn just how wrong she was. And trust me, the reaction was something none of them were prepared for. The locks on my briefcase clicked open. That small sound echoed louder than it should have in a room full of people holding their breath. Across the table, Catherine's confident smile faltered for just a second. "Jim," she said quietly, forcing a laugh, "this isn't the time to play games." Behind her, Tyler crossed his arms. "Dad, seriously, just sign the papers and let's not make this awkward." I looked at him for a moment. 26 years old, future doctor, a kid who had never once asked where the money for his education actually came from. Then I slowly opened the briefcase. Inside wasn't cash, not jewelry, not anything dramatic, just folders, neatly organized folders. I pulled the first one out and placed it on the table between us. Melissa leaned forward. "What is that?" I slid the document toward her. She frowned as she read the title, Property Deed. For a moment, no one said anything. Then Tyler scoffed. "Okay, and?" I opened another folder, then another, each one landing on the table with a quiet thud. Deed, mortgage statement, rental agreement, tax document. The stack grew higher until even the people standing closest to the table started leaning in to see. Someone near the back whispered, "Wait, those are properties." Catherine's face tightened. "What is this, Jim?" I folded my hands calmly. Documentation. Of what? She asked sharply. I leaned back in my chair. Of everything you didn't bother asking about for the last 15 years. The room was completely silent now. Even the bartender had stopped pouring drinks. Melissa picked up one of the papers again, reading slower this time. Lakewood duplex? She murmured. Tyler grabbed another file. Parma single-family rental? His voice cracked slightly. He flipped to the next one. Cleveland Heights apartment building? Catherine's eyes snapped up to mine. What are they talking about? I gave a small shrug. Real estate. Real estate? What? Investments, I said calmly. Tyler looked back down at the stack. There were too many folders now. Way too many for this to be a joke. How many? He asked slowly. I tilted my head. 11. Someone in the crowd actually laughed in disbelief. 11 properties? My supervisor, Bill, stepped closer. Jim, are you telling us you own all of these? I nodded. Bought the first one in 2008, right after the market crash. Catherine stared at the papers like they were written in another language. That's impossible, she whispered. We could never afford. You couldn't, I corrected gently. I could. Tyler's face had gone pale. Dad, these rental agreements. He flipped through one, then another. These are monthly payments. Yes. How much? He asked. I paused, not because I didn't know the number, because I knew exactly what it would do to them when they heard it. Finally, I said it. About $15,000 a month. The words dropped into the room like a bomb. Someone actually choked on their drink. Melissa grabbed the back of a chair to steady herself. 15,000? Every month? Catherine's voice came out as barely more than a whisper. You're lying. I smiled. No, Catherine. Then I gently pushed the stack of documents closer to her. I've just been quiet. And that was the moment my family realized something terrifying. They hadn't just divorced a simple utility worker. They had just publicly celebrated leaving a man who had been building a quiet empire the entire time. And the worst part, they still had no idea how big it really was. And the next thing that happened in that room made their celebration turn into absolute panic. For a few seconds after I said $15,000 a month, nobody in the room spoke. It was the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels heavy. Tyler was still staring at the rental agreements in his hands, like the numbers might change if he blinked enough times. 15,000? He repeated. I nodded. Roughly. Some months more, some months less. Melissa shook her head slowly. That's not possible. She picked up another document and flipped through the pages. Dad, these leases, these tenants are paying you? Yes. How many people live in these places? Last time I counted, 27. Someone behind us muttered, Holy hell. Catherine still hadn't touched the papers. She was staring at me instead, like she was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't understand. You're saying, she said carefully, that while you were working for the city, you were secretly buying houses? Not secretly, quietly. Tyler finally looked up. But how? He demanded. You make, what, 50 grand a year? A few of my coworkers exchanged amused looks. I sighed. That's what you thought? Well, yeah, he said. Most people in that kind of job. Tyler, my supervisor Bill interrupted, stepping forward. Electrical linemen make a lot more than 50. Tyler blinked. Bill pointed at me. Your dad was one of our top guys. Overtime alone probably doubled his salary some years. Tyler's face shifted from confusion to something closer to embarrassment. I leaned forward slightly. Last year, I made $96,000. Melissa's mouth opened. You never told us that. You never asked. Another quiet wave of whispers moved through the room. People were starting to connect the dots. All those storms, all those overtime calls, all those weekends I'd said I was working. Catherine finally reached for one of the folders. Her fingers trembled slightly as she read the top page. Cleveland Heights Apartments? She flipped the page. 8 units? I nodded. Bought it in 2013. Her eyes darted across the numbers. Then she looked up slowly. You paid $400,000 for this building? 395. The room erupted into murmurs again. Melissa covered her mouth. Dad, that's... Her voice faded. Tyler ran a hand through his hair. You're telling me you've been doing all this the whole time? Yes. And you never said anything? I met his eyes. When exactly would that conversation have happened, Tyler? He didn't answer, because we both knew the truth. The last 15 years of family dinners have mostly sounded like this. Tyler talking about medical school, Melissa talking about her MBA, Catherine talking about vacations we couldn't afford. And me? I was the quiet guy at the end of the table, the one who just worked for the city. Catherine suddenly pushed the papers away. This doesn't change anything, she said quickly. Her voice had a new edge now, nervous. The divorce is already filed. I know, I said calmly, and you're still entitled to half of what we built together. That sentence made a few lawyers in the room raise their eyebrows. I tilted my head. Half of what we built? Yes. She straightened in her chair. The house, the savings, the retirement account. I nodded slowly. Of course. For the first time since the reveal, a small smile returned to her face. But it didn't last long, because I reached into the briefcase again and pulled out one final folder, a thin one. But the words on the front of it made my attorney friend across the room lean forward. Property ownership records. And when Catherine saw the name printed on every single deed, her color drained from her face. Because for the first time that night, she realized something was very, very wrong. Catherine stared at the folder like it might bite her. Her hands moved slowly as she opened it. For the first time that night, she wasn't competent. She was careful. Inside were copies of the official property records, titles, purchase contracts, ownership filings. She scanned the first page, then the second, then the third. The color drained from her face so quickly it was almost painful to watch. Jim, she said quietly. I waited. Her eyes lifted toward me. Why is your name the only one on these deeds? The question floated across the table. A few people leaned closer. They understood what that question meant. Tyler didn't. Mom, what difference does that make? He asked. Catherine didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, because she already knew the answer. I folded my hands calmly. Because I bought them. With what money? She snapped. My money. That's impossible, she said immediately. We were married. Yes, I said. And during those years, you managed the household budget. She blinked. You handled the credit card, the groceries, the vacations, the furniture from Target. A few people chuckled quietly. But the overtime checks, I continued, the emergency storm pay, the holiday shifts, the extra weekend work? I shrugged slightly. You never asked where that money went. Tyler frowned. Wait, are you saying you bought all these properties with overtime? Mostly. Melissa shook her head in disbelief. But that's still family money, she said. Across the room, someone cleared their throat. A woman stepped forward. Technically, not necessarily. Everyone turned. She gave a small, apologetic smile. Sorry, I'm Janet Walsh, divorce attorney. A few people laughed nervously. Perfect timing. Janet looked down at the documents on the table. If these properties were purchased with individual earnings, titled only in Mr. Crawford's name, and managed through separate accounts, she paused, then looked at Catherine. They may legally qualify as separate property. The words hit the table like a hammer. Tyler blinked. What does that mean? Janet answered gently. It means they're his. Melissa's eyes widened. All of them? If the documentation holds up in court, yes. Catherine shot to her feet. That's ridiculous. Her voice cracked now. We've been married 35 years. Yes, I said quietly, but you spent most of those years explaining to people how little I achieved. A few uncomfortable murmurs moved through the crowd. Catherine's hands were shaking. You hid this from me. No, I corrected calmly. I simply didn't discuss it. Tyler looked between us, panic creeping into his voice. Dad, how much are these properties actually worth? I thought about it for a moment. Not because I didn't know the answer, because I knew exactly how loud the number would sound in that room. Finally, I answered, about $2 million. Gasps filled the hall. Melissa covered her mouth. Tyler dropped the papers in his hand. And Catherine? She slowly sank back into her chair, staring at the stack of documents like they were the ruins of something she thought she owned. Because the reality was finally settling in. She hadn't just filed for divorce from a simple city worker. She'd filed for divorce from a man who owned an empire she didn't know existed. And worse than that, the papers she just handed me might have been the biggest financial mistake of her entire life. For a long moment, no one moved. You could hear the hum of the old lights in the ceiling, the quiet shuffle of people shifting in their chairs. Someone coughed near the bar. But at our table, time felt frozen. Catherine was staring at the documents like they were a language she didn't speak. Tyler broke the silence first. $2 million? His voice sounded small now. Not confident, not superior, just stunned. I nodded once. Rough estimate. Melissa blinked rapidly. But we never had that kind of money. That's correct, I said calmly. We didn't. Her eyebrows pulled together. Then how? The properties did. Tyler grabbed another document and flipped through it faster now. Wait, these rent payments. His finger traced a column of numbers. Dad, these people are paying you every month. Yes. How much? I leaned back in my chair. A little over $15,000. The room erupted again. Someone near the back whistled. Another voice said, "That's more than most doctors make starting out." Tyler slowly lowered the paper. 15,000 a month? Passive income, I said. His brain was clearly doing the math. That's 180,000 a year. I shrugged slightly. Give or take. Melissa looked like she might faint. Dad, you've been making that while working your regular job? Yes. Why? It was an honest question, and for the first time that night, I answered honestly. Because I liked my job. The room chuckled softly. But also, I continued, because the job gave me something valuable. Tyler frowned. What? Opportunity. I looked around the room at the men I'd worked beside for decades. Every overtime shift, every storm call, every weekend emergency. I tapped the stack of folders. That money went here. Bill, my supervisor, shook his head in disbelief. Jim, you sneaky son of a gun. A few of the guys laughed. You've been building this the whole time? 15 years, I said. Melissa's voice came out barely above a whisper. Why didn't you tell us? I looked at her. Really looked. When exactly would I have told you? She opened her mouth, then closed it again, because we both knew the answer. Family dinners weren't exactly conversations. They were lectures about how much better everyone else was doing. Tyler talking about surgeons he admired, Melissa talking about startup founders, Catherine talking about husbands in the neighborhood who owned businesses. And me? I was the quiet guy who just worked for the city. Catherine sat frozen, staring at the folder as if it might burn her hands. "Jim," she whispered again. I leaned forward slightly. "Catherine, do you know what the real mistake was?" Her eyes flicked up at me, suspicious. "Which one?" "Thinking you knew everything about me." Tyler looked confused. "Dad, what does that even mean?" I smiled faintly. "It means I was never just the man you thought I was. I've been building my life quietly, without needing anyone's approval." Melissa, pale but alert, finally spoke. "So, all this money, it was yours?" "Mostly. Every property, every dollar, every account. Separate, legal, mine." Catherine's voice rose, trembling now. This isn't fair. We've been married 35 years. You can't just hide everything." I leaned back, calm as a lake. "Life isn't about fairness, Catherine. It's about preparation. And I was prepared." A few of my coworkers exchanged glances, impressed. Someone whispered, "That's genius." Catherine looked down, defeated, fumbling with the papers. You didn't even fight for us?" "I did," I said softly, "every day, but not in the way you imagined." Tyler shook his head, speechless. Melissa whispered, "Dad, this changes everything." I nodded. Yes, everything. And for the first time that night, the power shifted completely. The room had gone silent. No one spoke. People weren't sure if they should clap, gasp, or leave. Catherine suddenly snapped, You're going to ruin our family." "I think you might be the one who did that," I said calmly. Her jaw tightened. "You think you're clever, don't you?" "I think I'm careful." Tyler finally stood. "Mom, maybe this isn't the time." Catherine whirled on him. "Shut up, Tyler. You don't get it." I looked at her. No, she doesn't. Because the truth doesn't care about what anyone wants. It just is. Janet, the attorney, cleared her throat. "Catherine, if we continue with the divorce filing, keep in mind—" Catherine's face fell as Janet continued. "All separate property, properly documented, usually stays with the original owner." Catherine froze. "You're serious?" Janet nodded. "Very." Catherine slumped back in her chair. She looked like a woman realizing she'd lost more than just a battle. She'd lost control. Melissa put a hand on Tyler's shoulder. "This is crazy," she whispered. Tyler's eyes darted to me. "Dad, I don't even know what to say." I smiled faintly. "You don't have to say anything. Just remember what you've seen tonight." By now, some of my coworkers had left. It had become clear the family drama wasn't their problem, and honestly, they were relieved. Catherine was still staring at the folder. I can't believe this," she muttered. "You'll get used to it," I said. "No," she said sharply. "You won't, because I didn't just build money. I built security, independence, and freedom from manipulation." Tyler swallowed hard. "So, all those times you were just working, you were planning this?" "Yes." Melissa shook her head slowly. "Dad, that's brilliant." Catherine stood suddenly, trembling. You can't just take everything and leave us with nothing." "I'm not taking anything," I said quietly. "You already left me with everything I need." She froze, realizing the words weren't about money. She sank back into her chair, powerless, defeated, shocked. Tyler finally whispered, "Dad, you thought of everything, huh?" I nodded. Everything. The room had grown tense. No one spoke as Catherine finally looked at the papers more carefully. Then she leaned back, realizing the truth. The man she'd underestimated had outsmarted her completely. Melissa finally said, softly, "Dad, what now?" I smiled faintly. "Now we move forward, on my terms, carefully, quietly." Tyler looked at me, awe in his eyes. You really are unstoppable, Dad." I chuckled softly. "Not unstoppable, just patient and prepared." Catherine said nothing. She just stared at the table. She realized that her assumptions, her manipulations, hadn't worked. Not once. And that realization hurt more than anything. Janet cleared her throat. "If you'd like, we can start reviewing divorce terms now," she said. Catherine's voice cracked. "There's nothing left to review, is there?" I shook my head slowly. "No, you've already seen everything. You know what's yours. You know what isn't." Tyler finally spoke. "Mom, I think we all need a minute." She nodded but didn't move. Melissa whispered to me, "Dad, you changed everything tonight. Everyone's perspective. It's insane." I nodded. Perspective matters, especially when people assume things about you. Catherine finally rose, shaky and pale. You've won," she whispered. "I didn't want to win," I said calmly. "You made me fight for a family I didn't really own," she said bitterly. "Maybe," I replied. "Or maybe I just reminded you some things can't be claimed with words. They can only be earned, quietly, over time." Tyler looked stunned. Melissa whispered, "Dad, this is legendary." I allowed myself a small smile. Let's call it quietly legendary. Catherine walked toward the door. She stopped and looked back. "Jim, you really are impossible." "Not impossible," I said softly, "just prepared." The room had quieted. Everyone was still processing. Tyler finally approached me. "Dad, I get it now. Everything you've done, it wasn't about money. It was about control, freedom, respect." "Yes," I said simply. Melissa hugged me quickly. "You're a genius, Dad." Catherine finally left, slamming the door behind her. The room exhaled collectively. I looked at my kids, smiling faintly. Now we rebuild, together, but this time on my terms. And for the first time in years, I felt completely free, completely untouchable, completely victorious. The retirement party had turned into the ultimate reveal, and nobody in that room would ever forget it.